My own son put the pen in my hand, sweating cold, believing my tired eyes wouldn't see the words "bill of sale" at the top of the page. I'm Bernadette. I'm 74 years old, spent my life plowing dirt and raising cattle. And even though I walk slow, my mind runs faster than a jackrabbit. He didn't know that while I pretended to tremble, I was already calculating how long it would take for the police to arrive and take away this stranger who carries my last name. The air conditioning in the notary's office was so high it seeped right into my bones. But that wasn't what made me feel cold. It was Roger's gaze. My Roger, the same boy whose scraped knees I patched up when he fell off his bicycle on the dirt roads of Hopewell. Now he was looking at me with an anxiety that wasn't worry, but greed. We were sitting across a polished wooden desk, shiny and fake, a world away from the old, honest wood of my kitchen table back at the ranch. "Come on, Mom, sign right here," Roger insisted, tapping the paper with an index finger chewed down to the quick. "It's just the pension paperwork I told you about, so the checks come straight to you and you don't have to drive into town every month. You know how your legs ache." I pulled my shawl tighter over my shoulders. It wasn't just any shawl. It was a thick wool wrap I knitted 20 years ago, when my husband, the late Everett, was still alive. That wool smelled of wood smoke and home. And right then, it was my only armor in an office that reeked of cheap pine cleaner and lies. "Hold on, son," I told him, my voice raspy, faking that exact clumsiness young folks just assume all us old people have. "Let me get my glasses. You know, without my borrowed eyes, I couldn't spot a mule 3 paces away." Roger let out a heavy, impatient sigh, checking the watch on his wrist. A gold thing. Too big, too flashy. Definitely not paid for with honest sweat. The lawyer, a bald man with a bored face who hadn't even bothered to look me in the eye, was typing something on his computer, either clueless or complicit. I didn't know which, yet. I dug into my leather purse, that battered black bag that has ridden shotgun to livestock auctions and funerals alike. My fingers brushed past my wooden rosary, the keys to the old truck, and finally, my glasses case. I took my time. I wiped the lenses with the edge of my shawl, deliberate slow, agonizingly slow. "Mom, please, the attorney is in a hurry," Roger said. And I caught that high pitch in his voice, the exact same tone from when I used to catch him stealing candy from the pantry as a kid. "The attorney bills by the hour, Roger. I doubt he minds an old woman taking her time," I replied, pinning the man behind the desk with a dead stare. The lawyer cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably, but kept his mouth shut. I put my glasses on. The world snapped into sharp focus, and there it was. Treason, printed on standard legal paper. It didn't say pension application. It didn't say administrative filing. The black letters, clear and cruel, read, "Transfer of property deed." And right below that, the details of my ranch. My 120 acres, the holding pens, the main house, the deep well, the orchards. My father planted everything. Roger was sliding my own living death sentence right across the desk. He wanted to sell me out. He wanted to leave me without a roof, without dirt, without a history. I felt a blow to my chest like one of my steers had kicked me straight in the heart. For a split second, my vision went white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and slap him right there in front of the lawyer and the receptionist, chewing gum out in the lobby. I wanted to ask him the exact hour his soul rotted away, the exact moment the little boy who brought me wildflowers turned into this vulture. But I swallowed it down. Years of haggling with ruthless cattle brokers and surviving droughts had taught me one thing. Whoever loses their temper loses the game. And whoever loses the game loses everything. I clenched my jaw and took a deep breath, filling my lungs with that canned artificial air. "Oh, son," I gasped, letting the pen drop onto the paper. "I've got a terrible cramp." Roger rolled his eyes, throwing his head back. "Come on, Mom, seriously. Just sign it and I'll take you to the gas station bathroom." "No, no, it's that blood pressure medicine." It tears my stomach up. I lied, pressing a hand to my belly and twisting my face in pain. "I can't sign like this. My hands are shaking too much. I need to use the restroom for a minute." The lawyer, probably terrified I was going to ruin his synthetic leather chair, pointed to a door down the hall. "End of the hall on the right, ma'am. It's unlocked." Roger looked at me with pure disgust, but helped me out of the chair. His hand on my arm felt completely alien, ice cold. "Don't take forever, Mom. We need to get out of here." "I won't be long, son. I won't be long." I shuffled toward the bathroom, dragging my feet just a little more than necessary, leaning heavily against the walls. The second I closed that bathroom door and slid the deadbolt, the mask of the fragile old lady hit the floor. I stood up straight. My hands were shaking. Yes, but with rage. An ancient volcanic fury. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw my gray hair, my wrinkles, the roadmap of a life spent doing hard labor under the brutal sun. I saw Bernadette, the woman who was widowed young and dragged a failing ranch out of the mud when every man in the county said a woman was useless in the dirt. Was I really going to let an ungrateful brat, even if he shared my blood, strip me of what was mine? Strip away the legacy I built for my grandchildren if they ever came along? "Over my dead body, Roger," I whispered to the glass. I pulled my cell phone from my purse. It wasn't one of those modern glass slabs. It was a heavy thing with big plastic buttons and a loud ringer, but it did exactly what it needed to do. I dialed the number from memory. Not the general dispatch number. I dialed the direct line for Jace, the county sheriff. Jace had been Everett's best friend, and even though he was half deaf now, he was the law in our valley and a man of his word. "Yeah," the gravelly voice answered on the third ring. "Jace." "It's Bernadette. Bernadette from Hopewell." "Bernadette? Well, I'll be damned. How are you, darlin'? Something happened with the herd?" "Shut up and listen, Jace. I don't have time. I'm at the lawyer's office downtown, the one next to the bank. My son." My voice cracked just a fraction, but I bit my lip hard and pushed through. "My son Roger brought me here under false pretenses. He wants me to sign over the deed to the ranch, making me believe it's a Social Security form." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. Jace knew what land meant to people like us. He knew it was holy ground. "That son of a bitch," Jace growled. "Are you okay? Did he lay a hand on you?" "No, not yet. I locked myself in the bathroom, but I need you to get down here. And don't come alone. Bring your deputies. This is attempted fraud, elder abuse, and God knows whatever else the district attorneys like to call it. I want him dragged out of here in handcuffs, Jace. I want him humiliated." "I'm on my way, Bernadette. I'm 3 blocks down. Don't come out until you hear the sirens. Or better yet, step out and keep him distracted. Give me 5 minutes. I'm flying." I hung up. I stared at the phone for a second before dropping it back in my bag. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my mind was as cold as a winter creek. I washed my face, smoothed back my hair, and straightened the collar of my blouse. I wasn't going to walk out of here crying. I wasn't going to walk out begging for mercy. I was going to walk out as the owner of Hopewell. I opened the bathroom door. The hallway felt a mile long now. At the far end, I saw Roger's back. He was leaning over the lawyer's desk, laughing at something, probably celebrating the cash he was about to blow. Cash stained with his own mother's sweat. I walked slow. Every step was a funeral march for the son I thought I had, and a harsh welcome to the reality I had to face. "About time, Mom," Roger said as he saw me plastering that fake concerned look back on his face. "Have a seat. Come on. The attorney has another appointment." I sat down. The lawyer slid the paper back across the wood. "Right here, ma'am. Just one little signature and a thumbprint." I picked up the pen. It felt heavy, like it was forged from solid lead. Roger was staring a hole through me. His eyes were wide, and he was rubbing his hands together, a nervous little tic he always had when he thought he was getting away with murder. "You know, son," I said, holding the pen, hovering right above the dotted line, "I was just thinking about your dad." Roger went rigid. "Mom, don't start with the stories. Just sign it." "I was thinking about the day he taught you how to ride. You were 6. He told you never to lie to a horse because the animal can smell fear and deceit and it will throw you." "What the hell does that have to do with anything?" Roger was losing his grip. His voice pitched up sharp and aggressive. The lawyer stopped typing and looked up, genuinely worried now. "It means life is exactly like that horse, Roger. You lie to it, it throws you. Just sign the damn paper," he screamed, slamming his fist on the desk. The lawyer jumped in his chair. "Sir, please," the bald man gasped. And that was the exact moment it happened. Right as Roger raised his hand, maybe to intimidate me, maybe to physically force the pen down, we heard it outside. Faint at first, then deafening. The wail of sirens. It wasn't just one cruiser, it was 2. We heard the screech of heavy tires locking up right out front of the building. Red and blue lights started violently flashing against the office blinds, painting the walls in the colors of an emergency. Roger froze his hand, still suspended in the air. He looked at the window, then snapped his eyes back to me. His face morphed from pure rage to utter confusion, and from confusion to absolute paralyzing terror in a matter of seconds. What is that?" he stammered. I laid the pen down on the desk gently, with a calm that even surprised me. I took my glasses off and clicked them back into their case. The heavy thud of boots charging up the stairs echoed down the hall. They were hard, authoritative steps. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands in my lap, and looked my son dead in the eyes. I didn't see the boy with the scraped knees anymore. I saw a stranger, and I don't waste pity on strangers trying to rob me. "I believe that's for you, son," I told him right as the office door flew open and the massive frame of Sheriff Jace filled the doorway. Roger went paper white, and looking into his eyes, I saw the exact second it finally clicked. He hadn't tricked a senile old woman. He had tried to bite the hand of a woman who broke 1,100-pound beasts with a single glare, and now the beast was wide awake. Watching your only child get escorted out by 2 deputies, hands cuffed behind his back, head hung low, that is not something a mother ever expects to see. You raise them to be decent men, to walk a straight line. But there was Roger, getting gently shoved into the back of a black and white. Meanwhile, the receptionist stared at us, jaw on the floor, completely forgetting to chew her eternal gum. The silence that settled over that office once they hauled my boy away was heavier than a sack of concrete. The lawyer, that sweaty, bald little man, stood frozen behind his desk, pale as a ghost, wiping his forehead with a crumpled handkerchief. He didn't dare look at me. He knew damn well that if I had signed that paper, he would have taken a massive slice of the pie. He was a silent accomplice, the kind who kills without ever getting blood on his cuffs. "Mrs. Bernadette," he started stammering, his voice trembling. I had no idea. Roger told me you were entirely on board, that this was just an internal family transfer. I acted in good faith. I stood up slowly, planting my hands flat on that fake wood desk. I felt its smooth, cold texture under my calloused palms. I stared at him over the rim of my glasses, the same ones that had just been my salvation and my shield. "Counselor," I said, and my voice sounded as hard as river stones in a drought. "Good faith doesn't hide in fine print or behind bogus titles. You looked at a country widow and assumed she was stupid. You figured because I wear sensible shoes and a shawl, my brain had dried up." The man swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed up and down like a cork. "If I ever find out my name or the name of my ranch crosses this desk again without me sitting right here with my own trusted attorney, I swear on Everett's grave you won't even have a license to sell hot dogs in the park. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, ma'am." "Crystal clear, ma'am." I picked my purse up off the floor and slung it over my shoulder with the dignity of a queen adjusting her crown. I walked out without looking back, leaving the AC humming its artificial little song. When I hit the sidewalk, the afternoon sun slapped me in the face. It was the sun of my valley, hot, honest, and brutal. I walked over to my truck, a '98 Ford that roared like an aging lioness but had never once left me stranded. I climbed up into the cab, slammed the door shut, and sat dead still for a minute. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Only then, in the absolute isolation of that cab, did I let myself shed a tear. Just one. It rolled down my hot, salty cheek, vanishing into the deep lines of my skin. I wasn't crying over the ranch or the money. I was crying because I had just buried the son I thought I raised, and now I had to go to war with the stranger who took his place. Roger wasn't a misguided kid. He was a man hollowed out by ambition, and I, his own mother, never saw it coming. I cranked the engine and that familiar rumble settled my nerves. I threw it in gear and pulled onto the highway, heading back to Hopewell. As I drove, watching the telephone poles and the neighbors' cornfields fly by, I started doing the math. Not money math, reality math. What did I actually have? I was 74 years old. I had a hip that acted like a barometer and eyes that needed help. I had 120 acres of prime dirt, 60 head of cattle, 3 quarter horses, and a house haunted by memories. But more than anything, I had the one weapon Roger underestimated. I had time. Young folks like my son live at a dead sprint. They want everything yesterday. They want the fast cash, the new truck, the instant respect. They think us old folks are invisible. They see us rocking on our porches or shuffling through the grocery store, and they assume our lives are already over, that we're just antique furniture waiting for the garbage truck. Roger looked at me and saw a passive obstacle. He thought, "Mom's old. She doesn't get it anymore. She won't fight back." That was his fatal flaw. He didn't understand that old age isn't weakness, it's camouflage. It's a trench where we sit and watch, dead quiet, stockpiling intel while the rest of the world makes noise. I pulled up to the gates of Hopewell. The wooden sign, bleached by decades of sun, welcomed me home. The dogs came sprinting toward the truck, barking their heads off in pure joy. I stepped out and nodded to Tucker, my foreman, a man of few words, loyal as the bedrock, who had been running fence lines with me since Everett was breathing. "Afternoon, boss," Tucker said, tipping his hat back. "Everything all right in town?" I stared at him. Tucker knew things. Ranch hands always know the weather before the owners do. If Roger was tangled up in something ugly, Tucker had to have seen the signs. Everything's fine, Tucker. I lied, keeping my chin up. But we're going to make some adjustments. Tomorrow morning, I want you to gather the boys at first light. We're doing a full inventory. Everything. Livestock, heavy equipment, feed. I want to know exactly how many rusty nails are sitting in the barn. Tucker looked at me sideways. We never ran hard inventories out of season. Something go wrong, Mrs. Bernadette? Just the opposite, Tucker. We're putting the house in order. And one more thing. If you see Roger driving up, do not open that gate. If he tries to force his way in, you radio me immediately. And if he gets stupid, you let the dogs off the chain. Tucker's eyes went wide as saucers, but he gave a sharp nod. He didn't ask a single question. That's the kind of loyalty a blank check can't buy. I walked into the main house. It was cool and cast in shadows. The smell of floor wax and morning coffee still hung in the air. I went straight to my bedroom, but not to rest. I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the solid oak armoire across the room. Roger had acted out of pure desperation. A man doesn't try to rob his own mother blind and liquidate the family legacy unless he's drowning in deep water. I needed to know exactly how deep that water was. I needed to know exactly who the hell I was fighting. Was this just Roger's greed? Or was someone pulling the strings? Gambling debts, women, dirty money. I stood up and walked down the hall to the guest room Roger used on the rare occasions he actually bothered to visit. I pushed the door open. The room smelled stale, tainted with that cheap, overly sweet cologne he bathed in. I started tearing the place apart. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. Privacy is a luxury you forfeit the second you try to put your mother on the street. I checked the nightstand drawers. Nothing but car magazines and stale gum. I checked under the mattress. Nothing. I opened the closet and went through the pockets of the few shirts he'd left behind. Inside a denim jacket, my fingers hit crumpled paper. It was a bank deposit slip, but it wasn't in his name. It was made out to a man named Elias Vance. The number on the slip made my blood run cold. $50,000, and the date was stamped 2 weeks ago. $50,000. That is a hell of a lot of money for a casual wire transfer. And the name Vance rang a bell. That was capital city money. Hard money lenders. The kind of people who don't play games. I kept digging. Buried under a stack of beat-up shoeboxes at the bottom of the closet, I found a metal tin, the kind fancy cookies come in. I popped the lid. There were no cookies inside, just letters, final notices, court summons from a bank for maxed-out credit cards, and worse, a single piece of notebook paper with jagged, aggressive handwriting. You have until the end of the month, Roger. You pay us with the ranch, or you pay us in blood. You know we don't miss. A violent shiver ripped down my spine. I had to sit down on my son's bed just to keep my legs from giving out. So that was it. It wasn't just that he wanted cash for a new toy. They were threatening him. They were going to kill him. And in his utter cowardice and stupidity, he decided it was easier to sacrifice his parents' life's work than face the music for his own mistakes. He tried to feed me to the wolves to save his own skin. The fury flared up again, but this time it was laced with a cold, calculating dread. If these people wanted the ranch Roger sitting in a jail cell wasn't going to make the problem go away. Roger in jail only bought me a ticking clock. The second they realized the sale fell through, they'd come collecting, and they wouldn't be bringing notary paperwork. I shoved the note into my skirt pocket. I walked out of the room and locked the door behind me. I went straight to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of tap water. My hands were rock steady now. My mind was razor sharp, drawing lines, connecting the dots. The invisibility of old age. Roger banked on it. But these guys, this Vance crew or whoever they were, they banked on it too. They probably figured Roger would easily manipulate the sweet old lady. Or if he failed, she'd be a soft target to terrorize. They didn't know that Bernadette of Hopewell had defended this exact acreage from squatters 30 years ago with a pump-action shotgun while Everett was bedridden with typhoid. They didn't know I knew every ravine, every blind corner, and every choke point on this land. I needed a battle plan. I couldn't just sit in my rocking chair waiting for the debt collectors to kick my door in. First, I had to legally armor the ranch. First thing tomorrow, I was driving to the city. Not the local town, the real city. I was going to find a shark of a defense attorney and a legitimate notary. I was going to lock this ranch in a trust so bulletproof it would be untouchable, even to me. That way nobody could ever force a pen into my hand with a gun to my head. Second, I needed liquid cash. Not to pay Roger's debt, he was going to learn his lesson the hard way, but to fund a war. To hire private security if it came to it, or to have a go bag ready if I needed to ghost for a while. I walked over to the pantry. It's a tight, cool room where we keep the sacks of flour, the corn, the mason jars of preserves. I dragged a heavy wooden shelving unit out of the way, the one holding the massive cast iron pots. Behind it, built into the wall, was a field stone that looked just like the rest, but the mortar was loose. I pried it out. My fingers screamed. The arthritis flared in protest, but the stone gave way. There in that dark cavity Everett chiseled out 40 years ago sat my real insurance policy. Forget the banks. Banks go under, tellers talk. Sitting in the dark was an antique wrought iron lockbox. I pulled a key from around my neck, the one that always hung against my chest, right next to my silver cross. The heavy iron key slid into the mechanism and turned with a heavy, satisfying clack. I popped the lid. There it was. Thick bricks of $100 bills vacuum-sealed in plastic to keep the rot out. Gold coins my grandfather buried during the Depression, passed down quietly through the bloodline. And wrapped in a piece of red velvet cloth, my late husband's old Colt .45. I ran my thumb over the cold steel of the barrel. It sent a surge of absolute calm through my veins. I dropped the magazine. It was fully loaded. Everett always kept it hot. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it, he used to say. I grabbed the cash and the steel. I pushed the loose stone back into the wall and dragged the shelf back into place. Nobody, not even Roger, knew about that hole. He always assumed every dime we had was sitting in a checking account or tied up in livestock. He never dreamed his mother, the sweet old lady who knitted shawls, had an armory and a small fortune buried behind the pinto beans. I took my haul into my bedroom and locked it inside my personal floor safe, the one bolted into the concrete under a ratty old rug in my closet. I walked over to my rocking chair by the window overlooking the holding pens and sat down. The sun was starting to dip, bleeding orange and violet across the sky. It looked gorgeous, peaceful. But I knew the peace was dead and gone. Roger had unlatched the gate for the wolf. Now the wolf was circling the perimeter, and my boy was rotting in a holding cell, probably crying his eyes out and blaming his mother for his ruined life. I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Jace again. Bernadette, he answered on the first ring. I've got the boy in lockup. He's throwing an absolute fit, screaming you kidnapped him, saying you've gone totally senile. Let him scream, Jace. Let him tire himself out. Has anybody been down to see him? Not a soul. Not yet. But Bernadette, this is a powder keg. The judge is going to demand hard evidence. This is going to be a long, ugly process. I have evidence, Jace. and I'm about to get a hell of a lot more. But I need a personal favor. Name it. I want you to run a name for me. Elias Vance. And I want you to keep Roger locked in that cell for as long as legally possible for his own damn good. Vance. Jace went dead quiet. The heavy silence on the line was all the confirmation I needed. Bernadette, that guy is pure poison. He's heavy-hitting syndicate money out of the city. If Roger got into bed with him, I know Jace. That's exactly why my son needs to stay somewhere that psycho can't reach him. County jail is the safest place on earth for him right now, even if the idiot doesn't realize it. All right, I'll pull some strings to stall the bail hearing. But watch your back, woman. Bolt your doors. Don't you worry about me, old friend. I sleep with one eye open. I hung up. Night swallowed Hopewell whole. The only sounds were the crickets and the distant lowing of a restless calf. I brewed a pot of black coffee strong enough to strip paint. I wasn't going to get much sleep tonight. I pulled a fresh legal pad and a pen out of a kitchen drawer. I sat at the dining room table under the harsh yellow glare of the overhead bulb. I flipped the cover open. On the very first page, in big block letters, I wrote, Battle Plan. I'm no military general. I'm a cattle rancher. I know how to guard the herd from the coyotes. I know exactly when to string up barbed wire, and I know exactly when to grab the rifle and go hunting. Roger thought he was pulling a fast one on a helpless widow. Tomorrow, when that sun came up, the whole world, including my son's debt collectors, was going to find out there is no sweet little old lady living on this ranch. The matriarch lives here. And the matriarch just declared war. I slammed the notebook shut. The crack echoed through the empty house like a gunshot. I was ready. The sun hadn't even crested the ridge when I was already in the kitchen grinding coffee beans. That dark, bitter aroma filled the rooms, a smell that always reminded me that the day starts whether you give it permission or not. My hands knotted and sun-spotted, moved with the muscle memory of 10,000 identical mornings. But this one was different. I wasn't heading out to milk cows or check down fences today. Today I was building an invisible fortress around my life. Tucker walked in at 5:30 sharp, punctual as a heart attack. He took off his hat at the door and took the steaming tin mug I handed him without a word. We drank in absolute silence for a few minutes, just listening to the ranch wake up, the roosters crowing, the horses snorting in the stables, the wind rattling the branches of the old oak tree. "Tucker," I said, cutting through the quiet, "we aren't pushing the herd up to the north pastures today. I want every head of cattle kept close to the main house. And the boys, tell them to drop the brush clearing. Have them patch the barbed wire running along the main highway. I want every post, every single barb checked twice." Tucker stared at me over the rim of his metal cup. His dark eyes sunk deep into a face like tanned leather, glinted with sudden understanding. "We expecting company, boss?" "The kind that doesn't call ahead, Tucker. The kind that seeps in like black mold." "Understood." "And the rifles. Cleaned, oiled, and loaded, but out of sight. I don't want anyone flashing steel like a bunch of trigger-happy fools. If we have to use them, we use them. But we don't show our hand until the cards are on the table. The element of surprise is the only edge an old woman has against a pack of wolves." Tucker gave a single nod, downed the rest of his coffee in one gulp, and walked out. I watched him march toward the bunkhouse with the heavy, deliberate stride of a man who owns the ground he walks on. I was alone again. I changed into my town clothes, a heavy denim skirt, a perfectly starched white blouse, and my good boots, the ones that still shine even after 10 years. I draped my silver cross around my neck and grabbed my hickory walking cane. I don't need it to walk. My legs hold up just fine. I use it to point to clear brush, and if push comes to shove, to crack open a thick skull. I climbed into the truck and drove straight toward the city, flying right past the local precinct where Roger was rotting in a cell. I wasn't going to see him. Not yet. My mother's heart was bleeding, sure. I wanted to march in there with a hot meal and shake him until he told me why. But my patriarch's brain knew that showing an ounce of weakness right now would put us all in the dirt. First, I had to secure the roof over our heads. Then, and only then, I'd see if I could salvage the prodigal son who tried to burn it down. I drove 2 hours straight into the state capitol. The traffic made my head spin. So many cars, so much noise, thousands of people sprinting toward nowhere. I parked the Ford out front of Arthur Sterling's law firm. He was an old-school bulldog, a man from a different era who used to run with my father. His office smelled like dusty law books and pipe tobacco, the scent of ancient statutes and handshake deals. "Bernadette, what a pleasure, and what a damn shame to see you here," he said, pushing his heavy frame out of a tufted leather chair. "Jace called me. He gave me the rundown on the notary stunt and Roger." I sat across from him, resting both hands heavily on the polished knob of my hickory cane. "I didn't drive 2 hours to cry about it, Arthur. I came to armor Hopewell." Smart move. If he's up to his neck in gambling debts or syndicate money, they're going to come hard for the collateral. "Roger is the sole beneficiary in Everett's will, correct?" "He was," I said, and the word tasted like ash on my tongue. "I'm changing that right now. I want to establish an irrevocable trust. I want the land to belong to no one, and to belong to all my grandchildren, even the ones who aren't born yet. And I want an ironclad life estate clause for myself, granting me absolute operational control. I want it so tight that neither Roger nor his loan sharks nor God himself can touch a single blade of grass while I still have a pulse." Arthur pushed his glasses up his nose and started scribbling furiously on a legal pad. We worked for 3 straight hours. We went over every single clause, every microscopic piece of fine print. I made absolutely sure the name Vance could never legally attach itself to my acreage. When I finally signed, it felt like pulling a vault door shut. I had just disinherited my only child to save him from a bullet and to save the dirt that kept our bloodline alive. It was the most agonizing act of love I have ever committed. When I walked out, the sun was sitting dead high, baking the asphalt. I stopped at a gas station and bought a cheap burner phone and a prepaid SIM card. I didn't want anyone pulling my call logs if things went sideways. Then I started the long drive back. I was about 3 miles out from the ranch gates when I saw something that made my foot ease off the gas. A blacked-out SUV. One of those massive, sleek things that look like stealth bombers. It was idling dead center at the crossroads between the county line and the main highway. They weren't doing anything, just sitting there with the engine humming like buzzards waiting for something to bleed out. I felt that icy drop in my gut. The one that warns you the threat isn't just theory anymore. It's a physical reality breathing down your neck. I cruised past them slow and steady. I didn't turn my head. I kept my eyes locked forward, hands 10 and 2 on the wheel, looking like any other grandmother heading home from the grocery store. But in the rear-view mirror, I saw the brake lights flash. They pulled out. They were tracking me. I didn't gun the engine. If you run, you broadcast fear. If you broadcast fear, you become prey. I held it at a dead-even 25 miles an hour, letting the gravel dust kick up and blind their windshield. I punched Tucker's number into the burner phone sitting on the passenger seat. "Tucker, I've got a tail." I snapped the second he answered. "Black SUV." They'll be at the main gate in exactly 10 minutes. I'm chaining the gate right now. Boss, no, leave it wide open. Open? But Mrs. Bernadette! Wide open. I said it, but I want you and the boys working right by the entrance. Keep the heavy tools in your hands and unchain the dogs, but do not let them strike unless I raise my cane. Do you copy? Copy that. I hung up. I pulled up to the main house. I parked the beat-up Ford under the heavy shade of the weeping willow. I stepped out cool as Sunday morning, grabbed my purse and my cane, and walked up onto the porch. I sat in my favorite rocking chair, the one that gives you a clear line of sight over the entire driveway. And I started shucking a basket of dried feed corn into an aluminum bucket, looking like I didn't have a single care in the world besides fattening up the hens. The black SUV rolled in slow, the heavy tires crushing the gravel. It parked about 30 feet from the porch stairs. The engine cut out. Two men stepped out. They weren't local boys. These guys wore flashy silk shirts, tight slacks, and pointed leather shoes that cost more than my John Deere tractor. One was heavy-set and sweating through his collar. The other was built like a rail, with a rat-like face and pitch-black sunglasses. They swaggered toward me. I didn't stop shucking the corn. The dry, hollow sound of the kernels hitting the tin was the only noise in the yard. "Afternoon, ma'am," the skinny one said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. He didn't take his sunglasses off. Trash manners. I looked up slow, adjusting my glasses like I was having trouble getting him into focus. "Good afternoon to you boys," I answered, letting a heavy, brittle tremor seep into my voice. "Can I help you? You looking to buy milk?" "We don't sell direct anymore. You have to go down to the co-op." The heavy one let out a nasty, mocking little laugh. "We ain't looking for milk, Grandma. We're looking for Roger. Roger Mendoza." "Oh, my sweet boy." I sighed, letting a cob drop into the bucket. "He's not here. Some terrible men took him away. Police officers. They said he did something awful. I just don't understand any of it, gentlemen. I'm just so lonely and so heartbroken." The skinny one took a step up. He was invading my space. "We know he's in lockup, lady. But Roger left a massive tab open with our boss, and he told us you were going to square it up. Said you had the paperwork all ready to go." "Paperwork?" I asked, playing the confused old bat. "Oh, the Social Security forms. Yes, he wanted me to sign something for my pension, but they took him away before I could. My poor baby." "Look, lady, let's cut the crap." The skinny one ripped his sunglasses off. His eyes were dead reptilian. "We're here for the deed to the ranch, or we're here for the cash. It's 50 grand plus vigorish. Let's call it 80,000 for the hassle. You hand over the cash right now, we walk away, and this never happened. You don't? Well, this is a massive piece of property. Accidents happen out here all the time. A barn burns down. A cow gets sick. You know how it is." There it was, the threat crystal clear. I set the bucket down on the floorboards. I wiped my hands on my apron. I leaned heavily on my cane and pushed myself up, letting the wooden chair groan beneath me. $80,000, I mumbled. That is an awful lot of money for a widow. "I'm sure you've got something stuffed under the mattress, Grandma. Look harder." I walked right up to the porch railing. I was 3 feet from the skinny guy's face. I could smell his expensive cologne and his menthol cigarette breath. "Boys," I said, and my voice dropped. The tremor was gone. It was the voice I used to bark orders in the middle of a blizzard. "I think you're confused." The skinny one frowned, instantly clocking the shift in my tone. "Come again," I said. "You are trespassing on private property, and on this ranch, mothers do not pay the debts of their grown men. Roger is an adult. If he owes Mr. Vance money, Mr. Vance can take it up with him." The second the name Vance hit the air, both men went rigid. The heavy one immediately dropped his hand to his waistband, right under his loose silk shirt. "You know the boss, the skinny one?" asked, dropping his voice to a hiss. "I know his breed," I fired back, locking eyes with him. "And I know Elias Vance isn't the kind of man to get cow manure on his Italian loafers. That's why he sends lapdogs like you." "You insolent old bitch," the heavy one roared, ripping a polished black pistol from his belt. The exact second the steel cleared his waistband, I lifted my cane and slammed it down onto the porch boards. One singular, deafening crack. It worked like a magic spell. Out from behind the bougainvillea bushes, 3 of my ranch hands materialized. Tucker stepped out from the blind corner of the house. Every single one of them was holding a brush axe, the heavy, razor-sharp steel we use every single day to hack through deadwood. They didn't point them. They just stood there, casually peeling an orange or wiping down the blades, staring at the hitmen with that terrifying, dead-eyed calm that only country boys possess. And the dogs. Buster Patch and Captain. My 3 blue heelers slid out from the crawlspace under the porch. They didn't bark. They unleashed a low, demonic growl, the hair on their spines standing straight up, baring their teeth inches from the intruder's ankles. The heavy guy froze his pistol, dangling halfway in the air. He looked at the hounds. He looked at the axes. He looked at Tucker, who was holding a steel spade like it weighed absolutely nothing. "Put that toy away, boy," I told the heavy one, keeping my voice dead level. "We don't like loud noises around here. It upsets the hens. And if you pull that trigger, my dogs are going to rip your throat out before the brass casing even hits the dirt. And if the dogs miss, Tucker doesn't." The skinny guy clamped a hand down on his partner's wrist, forcing the gun down. He knew how to do basic math. It was 2 of them against 5 men, 3 attack dogs, and an old woman who hadn't blinked once. "We're leaving," the skinny one said, backing away slowly. "This isn't over, lady. The boss doesn't forgive." "You tell Elias I said," walking down the steps. So I was standing dead level with them, invading my space now. "You tell him that the Hopewell Ranch does not belong to Roger anymore." As of 10 o'clock this morning, the deed was transferred to a corporate bank trust. If you shoot me, or if you torch my house, the bank seizes the entire valley and the federal government steps in. You tell him if he wants to collect, he can go stand in line at the federal courthouse with the rest of the creditors. It was a half-truth, but it sounded bureaucratic and terrifying enough to freeze them in their tracks. Syndicate guys despise federal oversight in big banks. They deal in cheap fear, and I had just stripped them of their only weapon. And one more thing I added, digging my hand deep into my apron pocket. The 2 thugs flinched hard, convinced I was pulling a snub nose. I pulled out a mason jar of peach preserves I canned myself last Tuesday. I shoved it into the skinny guy's chest. "Take it, for your nerves. A little sugar to wash down the bitter taste of a wasted trip." The skinny guy stared at the jar, then stared at my face. For the first time, I saw genuine terror in his eyes. He couldn't process it. He didn't know if I was mocking him, threatening him, or if I was completely out of my mind. He took the jar with a shaking hand. "Get off my land," I ordered, slamming the cane into the dirt this time. "And if you ever come back, I won't be polite enough to hand you preserves. Next time, I'm handing you lead." They scrambled into the SUV like rats. The heavy guy practically tripped over his own feet. They slammed it into reverse, tires screaming, kicking up a massive cloud of dust and gravel. Running like the devil himself was on their bumper. I stood dead still in the driveway, until the black truck vanished over the ridge. My legs, which had been planted like oak trunks, suddenly felt like wet paper. I had to lean all my weight onto the cane. Tucker walked up and took me gently by the elbow. "You all right, boss?" "I'm fine, Tucker. I'm fine." "You think they'll be back?" "Them? No. They're just errand boys. But the man holding their leashes, that's a different story. We won respect today, Tucker, but we just declared open warfare." I stared down the empty road. The late afternoon sun was washing my acreage in a gorgeous golden light. Everything looked perfectly at peace, but I knew it was borrowed time. I had weaponized my age, my grit, and the absolute loyalty of my crew to scare off the coyotes. But Elias Vance wasn't a coyote. He was an alpha wolf. I walked back into the house. My hands were shaking a little now that the adrenaline was draining out of my system. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. As I drank, I caught my reflection in the dark window pane. I didn't see Bernadette, the victim, anymore. I didn't see Bernadette, the heartbroken mother. I saw Bernadette, the general. Roger had dragged the hurricane to our doorstep. "Fine, let it rain. I've got deep roots, and I am not moving an inch." I pulled the burner phone out again. I had one more call to make. Not to the cops, not to the lawyers. I had to call my nephews, the sons of my late sister Joanne up in the mountains. They are rough, off-the-grid boys. They don't give a damn about the law, but they understand blood, and they understand protecting the pack. If Vance wanted to drag us into the mud, I was going to show him that we fight a hell of a lot better in the dirt than he does. I dialed the number. "Yeah," a young gravelly voice answered. "Hey, kiddo, it's your Aunt Bee. I need you and the cousins to pack your gear and get down here. There's work on the ranch. The kind of work that pays in honor, not cash." I smiled. A cold, hard smile that didn't reach my eyes. The silent execution had begun. The ranch hands were my shield. The law was my fortress wall. But my family was going to be my sword. Sunrise at Hopewell had always been my sanctuary, but that morning the air felt heavy, electric, like the agonizing pressure right before a brutal summer hailstorm. It wasn't thunder rolling in the distance. It was the roar of a beat-up V8 engine grinding up the incline. My dogs, who had been vicious killers yesterday, were wagging their tails now. They knew exactly who was coming. Austin and his brothers piled out of a rusted Chevy Silverado. My nephews. Joanne's boys, God rest her soul. Mountain men. Massive hands, short sentences. Boys raised in the pine tar and the fog, in places where the law arrives 3 days late or never arrives at all. Austin, the oldest, pulled his cap off when he saw me on the porch. He had those dead, calm eyes, the kind that belong to a man who has seen terrible things and just stopped being scared. "Aunt Bee," he said, kissing my hand with that old-world respect. "Austin, thank you for getting here so fast. Blood calls, Aunt Bee. And if blood's in a corner, the steel comes with it." They didn't bring brush axes like my hands. They were pulling long, heavy bundles wrapped in moving blankets out of the truck bed. I didn't ask what was in them. I didn't need to. I pointed them toward the rear storage sheds, blind spots invisible from the main road, but with a sniper's view of the entire property. Hopewell didn't just have eyes anymore. It had fangs. With my flanks secured, it was time to face the most agonizing phase of the operation. I told Tucker to drive me into town in my truck. I couldn't focus on the road. I needed to sit in the passenger seat and rehearse every single syllable I was about to deliver. When we hit the precinct, the stench of damp concrete and cheap bleach turned my stomach. Jace was waiting for me, looking grim. Bernadette, this is insane. The kid has been bawling for 2 days straight. Says he's freezing, says the food is slop. It's a jail cell, Jace, not the Ritz-Carlton. I snapped back, even as my heart withered in my chest. Let me see him. They walked me back to holding, and there was Roger, my little boy. The man who used to draw me pictures with crayons, now sitting on a concrete slab, clothes wrinkled, rocking a 3-day beard. The second he saw me, he shot up and slammed his hands against the bars. "Mom! Mom, get me out of here!" he begged, his eyes bloodshot and wild. I swear to God, I didn't want to do it. They forced me. "They're going to kill me, Mom!" I stood dead center in the hallway. I didn't step close. I didn't want him to see my hands trembling. Nobody is going to kill you in here, Roger. You're completely safe. You don't get it. Vance doesn't play games. If I don't hand over the deed doesn't exist anymore, Roger. I cut him off, my voice cracking like a whip. The ranch is locked in an irrevocable trust. Nobody can sell it. Not you, not me, not the Pope himself if he came down from the clouds. Roger froze. His hands slipped off the iron bars. He stumbled backward and collapsed onto the cot like a puppet with its strings cut. "What did you do?" he whispered. "You just killed us. He's gonna wipe us off the map." "Let him try," I said, finally stepping up to the steel grid. "But I need to know one thing, and you better not lie to me this time because this is the absolute last chance you have to be my son and not a stranger. Why the ranch? Out of all the properties, why Hopewell? There are bigger spreads, prettier spreads." Roger buried his face in his hands. He sobbed the exact same way he did when he broke a toy at 5 years old. "The water, Mom. It's the well." Vance bought up all the dead dirt up north to build a luxury subdivision, but he hit dry rock. The surveyors proved our deep well taps directly into the main underground aquifer. Without Hopewell, his multi-million-dollar development is worthless. It's just dust. A spike of pure, unadulterated rage drove through my skull. It wasn't just dirty gambling money. It was our water, the lifeblood of the valley. They wanted to bleed my pastures dry to fill up swimming pools for rich city folks. "I see," I said, straightening my spine. "So this isn't just a debt. It's a corporate acquisition." "Mom, please just pay him whatever he wants. Liquidate the herd. Give me the cash so they back off." I looked at him with an exhaustion that felt 1,000 years old. Roger still didn't get it. He honestly believed you could pacify a tiger by feeding it a steak, totally blind to the fact that once it tastes blood, it eats your whole arm. I am not paying a single dime. Roger, you dug this grave because you are greedy and you are stupid. Now you are going to sit in this cage and you are going to keep your mouth shut until I say otherwise. This is the only square footage on Earth where Vance can't touch you without triggering a federal investigation. "Mom, don't leave me!" "I'm not leaving you, son. I'm saving your life, even if you hate me for it." I walked out of the precinct with my soul shredded, but my mind was a steel trap. I finally had the missing puzzle piece. This wasn't a standard shakedown. This was a hostile corporate takeover wearing a ski mask. Elias Vance needed my water, and that meant he couldn't put a bullet in my head. Not yet, anyway. He needed me alive to sign, or he needed the property totally abandoned. I rode back to the house. The midday sun was beating down like a hammer. Austin walked out to meet the truck. Aunt Bea truck has cruised past the gate twice, rolling slow. A gray Ford Raptor, blacked out windows. "It's him," I said. I felt it vibrating in my teeth. It's him or his right-hand man. Throw the gates wide open, Austin. You sure I want them open? Let them drive right up to the front porch if they want to. But tell your brothers to go hot. I want Hopewell looking like a ghost town until I give the signal. I took my seat on the veranda. I poured myself a glass of iced tea. I set a heavy leather binder containing Arthur Sterling's trust documents on the coffee table, right next to my burner phone. And I waited. 20 minutes later, the gray Raptor rolled through the gates. Trailing right behind it was the black SUV from yesterday, a two-car motorcade. They parked dead center in the yard. The dust settled slow. A man stepped out of the gray truck. He wasn't a kid. He was pushing 50, wearing a tailored linen suit that cost more than my annual grain budget and Italian loafers that had absolutely no business touching dirt. He pulled off a pair of designer aviators, sneered at my house, and then looked up at me with a smile that was supposed to be charming, but showed way too much teeth. Elias Vance. "Mrs. Bernadette," he called out, throwing his arms wide like we were old college buddies. "What an absolute pleasure to finally meet you. Your boy has told me so much about you." I stayed glued to my chair, rocking gently. "Mr. Vance. It's a damn shame I can't say the same. The only thing my son ever told me about you is that you're a thief and a coward who terrorizes old women." Vance's smile didn't slip, but his eyes went dead. He flicked two fingers and his apes piled out of the black SUV. 4 of them. Big, ugly boys. "I see you've got some fire in you. I respect that. But I came here to offer you a very lucrative exit strategy, Bernadette. Let's write off Roger's little tabs. I'll buy the ranch outright. I'll pay double market value. Cash right now." He pulled an aluminum briefcase from the back seat and slammed it down on the hood of his truck. He popped the latches. Bricks of cash. Serious money. Enough to live a quiet life 10 times over. "And what if I say no?" I asked, taking a slow sip of my iced tea. "Bernadette, Bernadette," he sighed, snapping the case shut. "You are an elderly woman. Tragedies happen. Old houses burn down from faulty wiring. People trip and fall into deep wells. It would be an absolute crying shame if Hopewell suddenly lost its owner. Then your grandkids, if you've got any, wouldn't inherit real estate. They'd inherit a nightmare." He dropped the threat with the grace of a feather, but it hit like an anvil. "You make a fair point, Mr. Vance. I am old, and old folks play dirty." I set my glass down and slapped my hand flat on the leather binder. "Number 1, I don't own this ranch anymore. Yesterday morning, I locked it into a blind trust. The legal title is held by a massive corporate bank in New York. If I die, if I go missing, or if my signature magically appears on a document under duress, the entire contract voids, and the deed is instantly donated to the Department of Defense for a tactical training ground. So if you put a bullet in me, you don't get the water. You get the United States military as your next-door neighbor. Does that sound like a good selling point for your luxury subdivision?" Vance's smile vanished completely. He took a heavy step forward, trespassing onto my grass. "You wouldn't pull a stunt like that. Test me." I held his stare unblinking. "Number 2, I know you need the aquifer. Roger sings like a canary when you put the fear of God in him. And I'm willing to bet your high society investors have no idea you're out here threatening widows to secure their assets." "I've got a manila envelope, Mr. Vance. It's packed with photos of your goons trespassing yesterday, audio tapes of Roger's frantic phone calls, and a stolen copy of your illegal water diversion blueprints. That envelope is sitting on the desk of an investigative journalist in the city. If I don't call him every 12 hours to confirm I'm still breathing, he cracks the seal and puts you on the front page." Vance's face flushed crimson. A thick vein pulsed in his neck. "You crazy old bitch!" he screamed, his polished facade totally shattering. "Get up there and drag her out. Burn this whole place to the ground." The four guerrillas lunged toward the porch, ripping pistols from their holsters. And that was the exact moment I lifted my cane. I didn't hit the floorboards. I just pointed it dead at the roof of the main barn. The unmistakable, terrifying sound of heavy pump actions racking rounds shattered the silence. Austin and his three brothers stepped out of the shadows. They were on the roof of the house up in the hayloft and flanked behind the brick pillars. They weren't holding toys. They had high-powered hunting rifles and sawed-off 12 gauges, the kind mountain boys use to drop buck or repel cartel scouts. The barrels were aimed dead center at the hitmen's skulls. The guerrillas froze solid. They knew the difference between a tough guy with a pistol and a death sentence. They were totally boxed in, and we held the high ground. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice eerily calm, ringing across the deadly quiet yard. "I'd like to introduce you to my nephews. They came down from the mountains. Up there, they don't bother with lawyers. They handle things differently. And they have zero patience for city boys who don't know how to knock." Vance looked up at the roof lines. He saw the dark steel tracking his every move. He saw Austin, who still hadn't blinked. He realized his crew was totally outgunned and outmaneuvered. "Drop your weapons!" Vance barked at his men, his voice choked with pure rage. "Smart move," I said. "Now listen to me very carefully because I am only going to say this once. Roger's debt is officially wiped clean. Consider it a hazard fee for the absolute headache you've caused me and for the stunt your boys pulled yesterday. Call it a settlement for emotional distress. Are you out of your damn mind? You think I'm just going to eat 50 grand? You aren't going to eat it. You're going to forget it entirely. Because if you ever set one foot on my property again, or if my son gets a single scratch on him inside that county jail, I will personally drive up to Georgetown. I will knock on the door of your sweet mother, Mrs. Vance, who goes to Catholic Mass every day at 6 p.m., and I will sit in her living room and tell her exactly how her big-shot businessman son makes his money. And believe me, Elias, you might not be scared of the feds, but I know damn well you're terrified of your own mother." Vance's eyes bulged out of his head. Dropping his mother's name was the kill shot. In this country, even the most ruthless mobster shakes in his boots when his mom gets involved. How the hell do you know that? Because old women talk, and I have friends in very high places. Elias Vance violently yanked on the lapels of his jacket, desperately trying to salvage a shred of his dignity. "This isn't over, Bernadette." "Yes, Elias, it is absolutely over, because you need water and the only thing you're going to pull out of this ground is lead and humiliation. Go find another aquifer and take your dirty money with you." Vance stared at me with pure, unfiltered hatred, but there was something else mixed in. Respect, or maybe real fear. He spun around, climbed into his raptor, and slammed the door. His guerrillas backed away slowly, keeping their eyes locked on my nephews on the roof, and piled into their SUV. The motorcade whipped around and tore out of the ranch 10 times faster than they rolled in. When the dust finally settled, Austin dropped off the low roof landing with the terrifying grace of a mountain lion. He slung his rifle over his shoulder and shot me a half smile. "Aunt B, you are vicious. The mom thing was a low blow." I let out a massive breath I didn't even know I was holding. My hands started shaking again, but this time I actually laughed. A nervous, totally unhinged laugh. "Austin, kiddo, all's fair in love and war." And this was war. You think they'll try again? Vance won't. He's a businessman, and I just turned this acquisition into a total loss. He'll go hunt an easier mark. I pushed myself up out of the chair. My body felt like lead, like I'd been hauling sacks of concrete for 12 straight hours. But the ranch was still standing. The wind was still rustling the oak leaves. The water was still flowing deep under our boots. Safe. We had won the war. We had saved the dirt. But the butcher's bill was high. That night, sitting at the dinner table with my nephews, eating a massive pot of beef stew and fresh cornbread to celebrate, I couldn't stop staring at Roger's empty chair. I had crushed the enemy at the gates. I had humiliated a ruthless kingpin. But the victory tasted like ash. I had taken my power back. I had forged myself into the iron matriarch they all feared and respected now. But in the fire, I proved to myself that I was completely alone. My own son wasn't sitting beside me out of loyalty. He was gone because of his own cowardice. I took a slow sip of black coffee and looked over at Austin. He'd make a hell of a ranch manager. Maybe it was time to start drafting a new will. Aunt B. Austin said, pulling me out of my head. "What are we doing about Cousin Roger?" I set my mug down on the table. The heavy clack of ceramic against wood sounded incredibly final. Roger sits in that cell a little while longer. He needs to figure out that actions have actual consequences. And when he finally gets out, we'll see if he's willing to work this dirt as a hired hand. Because his shot at being the boss is dead and buried. I stood up and walked over to the window. The moon was washing my pastures in silver. Hopewell was secure. Bernadette was still standing. And the whole damn world just found out that you do not rob, you do not hustle, and you do not threaten this old woman. Tomorrow was going to be a long day. I had to hit the bank, the courthouse, and the chapel. But tonight I was going to sleep like a baby, with the shotgun locked away, knowing my dirt was still mine. 3 full weeks passed before I finally decided to pull Roger out of lockup. 3 weeks of the sun rising and setting over Hopewell without a single soul trying to steal the air we breathed. 3 weeks of my nephews, those quiet, relentless mountain boys, stringing up the downed wire and patching the barn roof that my own son had let rot away out of pure laziness. The house felt different. It didn't have that terrifying, hollow silence anymore, the kind you get when you're living alone, waiting for the next disaster to strike. Now it echoed with the stomp of heavy boots, the constant smell of black coffee, and deep, rumbling laughter out in the yard. Austin had become my shadow and my right hand. Wherever my strength gave out, he stepped in. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for a thank you. He just did it, running on that invisible moral code that decent men are born with. The morning I drove down to get Roger, I didn't put on my Sunday best. I wore my work clothes. Faded denim, a flannel shirt, and Everett's old Stetson. I wanted him to understand the exact second he laid eyes on me that I wasn't there to pick up Mommy's little boy. I was there to pick up a man who owed a massive debt. I walked into the precinct. Jace handed me Roger's personal effects in a clear plastic bag. His flashy gold watch, his empty leather wallet, and his designer belt. "He's lost weight, B," Jace warned me, keeping his voice low. "And he's totally shut down. Hasn't said a single word in 5 days." "Good," I replied, snatching the bag off the counter. "Silence teaches a man a hell of a lot more than screaming does." When the deputy slid the iron gate open, Roger shuffled out, dragging his boots. A thick, patchy beard covered his face. His hair was slick with grease, and he smelled like a cage, that disgusting mix of stale sweat and absolute despair that clings to you in a place like that. When he saw me, he didn't run to hug me. He stopped dead in his tracks, dropped his chin to his chest, and stared at my mud-caked boots. "Let's go," I said, turning on my heel without waiting for him. He trailed behind me out to the truck, climbed into the passenger seat, and just stared out the window with his hands locked tight between his knees. I cranked the engine and we rolled out of town. Neither of us said a word for the first 12 miles. The landscape blurred past us, green and alive, totally indifferent to our misery. "Did you pay him?" he finally asked, his voice cracked and gravelly, not even looking at me. "I didn't pay him a single dime, Roger." He whipped his head around, absolute panic flaring up in his sunken eyes. "Then Vance is gonna." "Vance isn't going to do a damn thing," I cut him off, white-knuckling the steering wheel. "Vance figured out that messing with this old woman costs a hell of a lot more than the water under our dirt is worth. He packed up and he is never coming back." Roger slumped back against the headrest, letting out a massive, shuddering breath, like a cinder block had just been lifted off his lungs. He closed his eyes, and for the first time I saw a real tear cut through the grime on his cheek. "Thank you, Mom. I swear to God I'm going to change. I'll sell the car. I'll get a real job in the city. I'm going to pay you back every single cent." I slammed the brakes, pulling hard onto the gravel shoulder. A cloud of dust completely swallowed the truck. I unclicked my seatbelt and twisted in my seat to look him dead in the eye. "You listen to me, and you listen to me well, because I am not repeating myself. You aren't going to any city. You aren't selling a damn thing because you don't own a damn thing. Austin already sold that ridiculous car of yours to buy winter feed for the herd." "Austin? What the hell is Austin doing here?" he asked, totally bewildered. "Austin is doing the brutal labor you thought you were too good for. Austin is bleeding for the dirt you tried to sell off for a quick payday." I popped the glove box and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a property deed. It was a standard employment contract I typed up myself and had Arthur Sterling notarize. "Read it." Roger took the paper, his hands trembling. His eyes darted back and forth across the legal text, pure disbelief washing over his face. "General ranch hand contract," he read in a whisper. "Mom, what the hell is this?" "It's your only lifeline, Roger. Hopewell is legally bulletproof. You aren't my sole heir anymore. The ranch is locked in a blind trust. If I drop dead tomorrow, operational control passes to a board of directors: Austin, Arthur Sterling, and the local pastor. You don't get to touch a single pebble." I watched his face totally cave in. The fantasy of the easy inheritance, the lazy rich boy lifestyle, just turned to ash in his hands. "But I'm your son. That is exactly why I'm doing this," I told him. And it felt like a knife twisting in my ribs to say it. But I kept my voice like iron. "Because you are my son. I am not going to let you starve to death, but I am absolutely not going to let you stay a useless parasite. You have a roof and hot meals on this ranch, but you are going to bleed for it. You're going to be up at 4 a.m. with Tucker. You're going to shovel out the stalls. You're going to vaccinate the herd, and you're going to patch barbed wire until your hands bleed. You're making minimum wage, exactly like the rest of the boys. And if you don't like it, the door is wide open. You can start walking down the highway right now." Roger stared at the contract, stared out at the empty road, and finally looked at me. He was searching for his mommy, the sweet old lady who always bailed him out. But she wasn't there. He was staring at the boss. "Sign it." I held out a ballpoint pen. He signed it, pressing the paper against the dashboard. His signature, which used to be massive and arrogant, came out tiny and jagged. I snatched the paper back, threw the truck in drive, and got back on the road. When we pulled through the gates, the transformation was impossible to miss. The front fences had a fresh coat of stark white paint, blinding in the sun. The front yard, which used to be choked with dead weeds, was freshly tilled, the rose bushes perfectly pruned. Austin was sitting on the porch, running an oily rag over a rifle barrel. When he saw the truck pull up, he stood up, slow, tall, and immovable as an oak tree. Roger slid out of the cab and just stood there, looking like a trespasser on his own property. Austin walked down the steps and stopped right in front of him. He didn't smile, but he held out his hand. "Welcome back, cousin. We've got a hell of a lot of work to do." Roger hesitated for a second. He looked at Austin's heavily calloused hand, looked up at my stone-cold face, and finally reached out. It was a quick, stiff handshake. No warmth at all, but it was a start. "Go change your clothes," I ordered Roger. "Tucker is waiting for you in the tool shed. You're starting by mucking out stable number 3. Roger gave a slow, defeated nod and walked toward the house. He didn't use the front door. He walked around the side to the mudroom, the entrance the hired hands use. He knew his place now. I stayed out on the porch with Austin. The late afternoon wind was rattling the branches of the old mesquite trees. "You think he's going to break, Aunt Bee?" Austin asked, watching my son disappear around the corner. "I honestly don't know, kiddo. Arrogance is a terminal disease, but breaking your back in the dirt is the best cure I know. If he survives it, maybe he'll actually become a man one day. And if he quits, well, at least I'll know I tried everything I could." The next few weeks were brutal. Watching my own flesh and blood sweating like a dog out in the brutal sun, his hands covered in popped blisters, his back hunched over, was agonizing. There were days I desperately wanted to walk out there with a pitcher of ice water and tell him to take a break, to come sit in the AC. But I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood, and I stayed out of sight. I knew that if I showed him an ounce of pity, I would lose him forever. Pity doesn't forge men, it breeds parasites. The town, obviously, couldn't stop gossiping. Rumor was that Mrs. Bernadette had lost her damn mind, that she was treating her own son like a slave, that her hillbilly nephews had staged a coup. I let them talk. Whenever I went down to the farmer's market on Sundays, I walked with my spine perfectly straight, leaning lightly on my cane, giving everyone an icy, knowing smile. One afternoon at the butcher shop, I ran into the notary's mother, Mrs. Gable, one of those vicious gossips who practically lives in the front pew at church, but spends all week tearing people down. "Oh, Bernadette," she cooed in that fake, syrupy voice. "It is just such a tragedy about your Roger. Everyone says you've got him living out there like a common field hand. Doesn't that just eat you up inside? With the kind of money you're sitting on, you could easily buy him a nice condo in the city." I stared at her over the rim of my glasses, the same glasses that had become my armor. "Listen to me, Mrs. Gable," I said, projecting my voice just enough so the entire line could hear me crystal clear. "The only thing that would eat me up inside is raising a thief or a useless coward. I am finally raising a man, even if it took me 40 years to get started. And let me tell you something else. I would rather my son have permanent calluses on his hands from honest dirt than have perfectly manicured fingers from forging legal documents, like some other boys I know." The butcher shop went dead silent. Mrs. Gable turned the color of a crushed tomato and didn't utter another syllable. I paid for my cuts and walked out. I could feel the heavy, respectful stares burning into my back. I wasn't the tragic poor widow anymore. I was the woman who looked the devil in the eye and told him to go to hell. But the real transformation wasn't the ranch, and it wasn't the town's gossip. It was me. One late afternoon, months later, I took a long walk down the southern fence line, right where the creek cuts through the property. I sat down on a massive boulder under the heavy shade of an ancient cypress tree. The water was running crystal clear and freezing cold. The exact same water I almost caught a bullet over. The lifeblood of my dirt. Sitting there, I realized I wasn't scared anymore. Before all this, every time my joints flared up, every time I forgot a minor detail, I felt like the clock was running out, like I was becoming invisible, disposable. Now, every single wrinkle on my face felt like a combat medal. I had discovered the ultimate truth. Old age isn't a death sentence of irrelevance. It is the ultimate high ground. Because when you have absolutely nothing left to lose, when you stop giving a damn about what polite society thinks, when you accept that the Reaper is just another uninvited guest who will show up whenever he damn well pleases, you become incredibly dangerous. You become totally free. I heard heavy boots crunching the gravel behind me. I spun around, my hand automatically dropping to the heavy knob of my cane. It was Roger. He had leaned out. His skin was baked dark brown by the sun, the veins popping in his forearms under a filthy, sweat-stained t-shirt. He pulled his hat off. He didn't have that shifty, arrogant look in his eyes anymore. He had the exhausted, totally clear stare of a man who actually earned his daily bread. "Mother," he said. He didn't call me Mom with that whiny, entitled pitch anymore. He called me Mother, with total respect. "What is it, Roger? You finally quitting?" "No, ma'am. Just came down to tell you the spotted heifer, the sick one, she just dropped her calf. It's a bull, strong as an ox. Tucker thinks he's going to make a hell of a stud." I smiled. A genuine, warm smile. And what do you think Roger thought about it for a second, staring out at the running water? I think he's pretty damn lucky he was born right here. The dirt is good this season. The grass is coming in thick. And right there was the miracle. He didn't talk about auction prices or liquidating the calf. He talked about the dirt. He talked about the life. "Good work," I told him. "Get back up there. Make sure the mother is getting enough water." "Yes, Mother." He turned on his heel and started the long trek back up the hill. I watched him go. His stride was heavy-grounded, stepping squarely into his own shadow. He wasn't the perfect son. He never would be. But he wasn't my enemy anymore. I sat there for a long time, just listening to the wind tear through the valley. I pulled the wooden rosary out of my pocket, the exact same one I gripped in that notary's office on a day that felt a lifetime ago. I looked down at my hands. They were ancient, sun-spotted, gnarled by arthritis. But they were hands that had built an empire, defended it with iron, and rebuilt it from the ashes. Elias Vance never showed his face again. I read in the city papers that his massive development project got permanently stalled by zoning issues, and he was currently dodging federal indictments for wire fraud in another state. I used a blind courier to drop a single mason jar of homemade peach preserves on his desk in his high-rise office. No note, just the jam. I'm absolutely certain he got the message. I'm still right here. I'm still watching the perimeter. And I have plenty of jars left. I pushed myself up off the rock, leaning heavily on the hickory cane. The sun was dropping fast, painting the horizon in violent shades of violet and fire, exactly like the afternoon I decided to go to war. I took the slow walk back up to the main house. When I cleared the ridge, I saw my nephew sitting on the front porch laughing over something Tucker had said. Roger was sitting on the bottom step, a little off to the side, but he was listening. He was part of the crew quietly peeling an orange with a pocket knife. Austin spotted me walking up and immediately stood up to offer me my chair. "Have a seat, Aunt Bee. Coffee's hot." I sat down in my rocking chair, the queen on her wicker throne. I wrapped my hands around the steaming ceramic mug. I looked around the yard. This was my family. Not the perfect bloodline fantasy you see in the movies, but the one I forged in the fire with strict discipline and absolute grit. Hopewell was going to have a boss for a long, long time. And when I'm finally gone, when my ashes are just part of the dust kicking up off the dirt road, my history is going to stay anchored right here. Not as the tragic story of the poor widow who almost lost her farm, but as the legend of Bernadette, the woman who broke the wolves and dragged her son into manhood, kicking and screaming. I took a slow sip of the black coffee and stared out into the dark horizon where the first stars were just starting to burn through the black. Let them come. Whoever wants it. We'll be waiting on the porch. Because on this dirt, old folks don't die of fear. We die on our feet, and we only go when we are damn well ready. This story is a powerful reminder that true strength is not measured by the speed of our youth, but by the resilience of our character and the wisdom gained through a lifetime of experience. Bernadette's journey illustrates that being soft-spoken or advanced in age is not synonymous with being weak. Rather, these traits can be a strategic camouflage that allows one to observe, plan, and ultimately protect what is most sacred. The lesson here is that boundaries are not just for others, but for the protection of our own dignity, legacy, and self-worth. When we face betrayal from those we love, the hardest but most essential act of love can be setting firm consequences that force them to grow. By choosing to stand her ground, Bernadette teaches us that we do not have to accept the roles others force upon us, whether they see us as vulnerable, invisible, or disposable. True power lies in the calm, steady refusal to compromise our values, even when the pressure is immense. We must realize that the dirt we walk on, our history, our labor, and our life's work, is worth fighting for, and that we are capable of far more courage than we give ourselves credit for. Taking back control of one's life requires a mixture of sharp intelligence, emotional regulation, and the courage to endure the temporary pain of conflict to secure a lasting peace. Ultimately, this narrative invites us to cultivate a sense of inner armor that no external greed or manipulation can pierce, proving that while others may underestimate us, we must never underestimate our own capacity to defend our truth. Educational disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction, created for educational and entertainment purposes. The characters, situations, and conflicts portrayed are entirely imaginary and are intended to serve as a narrative tool for exploring themes of resilience, boundaries, and personal growth. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. Personal reflections. Bernadette's transformation from a fragile widow into a formidable matriarch is a masterclass in reclaiming personal power. I am struck by how she reframes old age not as a decline, but as a position of strategic advantage. The way she separates her love for her son from her refusal to enable his destructive behavior is deeply profound and human. It is a sobering reality that sometimes the people who know us best are the ones who weaponize our perceived weaknesses against us. Her decision to maintain her dignity in the face of the lawyer's complicity and her son's greed is a testament to her unshakable moral compass. I find the concept of reality math, calculating one's actual worth versus the illusions of fast cash, to be a vital life skill. The story emphasizes that loyalty, when earned through hard work rather than bought with money, is the only currency that lasts in a crisis. It is incredibly moving that even in her moment of greatest anger, she never once loses sight of her ultimate goal, the preservation of her legacy. There is a beautiful, if harsh, integrity in how she forces Roger to confront his own lack of character through physical labor. The metaphor of the ranch as holy ground resonates with anyone who understands the weight of their own history and hard earned achievements. I admire that she refuses to be a victim, choosing instead to be the architect of her own defense. Her interaction with Elias Vance proves that when you stand on the truth, even the most dangerous adversaries can be neutralized by transparency and resolve. It is empowering to see an older protagonist embrace their agency so completely in a world that often ignores them. The ending, where she finally earns the respect of her son, shows that true connection is often born from boundaries rather than blind indulgence. This narrative reinforces my own perspective that no matter the age or the circumstance, it is never too late to declare war on the things that threaten our integrity. Disclaimer: this content is provided for informational and storytelling purposes only. The ideas and actions depicted are fictional and should not be taken as legal, financial, or tactical advice. Always seek professional guidance when dealing with legal or security-related matters.